guys, I have an art journal page to share today because I'm going to be working with the mixed media things that come in our Kitaholic Kits for March of 2021. And I have these butterfly stencils and I'm taking them out because they sort of come in a couple of parts. You've got the internal butterflies that have got all of that detail on them, and then you have this part that's got the butterfly shape, like the outline on there. So I want to use both of these in different ways. So first I'm getting this cardstock. This is just the same cardstock that I use for like making a scrapbook layout. It's the Basil Marshmallow white cardstock. And then I'm going to be using some of these sprays that came in the kit. They're Dinah Wakely gloss sprays. And they're really cool because when they dry, they look like they've got like a wet finish. They're glossy. So I wanted my pink one to just be pink, and then I wanted that one that's blue to have a little bit of blending on it. So I masked off the pink one, and then I let the other one sort of overlap a little bit. So you get that lovely purpley colour when they blend. So what I've done now is I've grabbed my modelling paste and then this other part of the stencil, and I'm going to use that to get that sort of textured details on the butterfly wings. I'm doing this on a piece of tracing paper to start with, and I wasn't sure. I want to create some kind of textured wings that I can layer over the top of these coloured parts. So I want them to be like semi-opaque, and I want them to be soft. And I wasn't really sure how these different papers were going to take the modelling paste, because that's got a fair bit of weight to it. So because it takes a little while to dry, I thought I would do 2 lots and just see what happens and pick the one that works best. So I did the tracing paper first, and now I'm doing some tissue paper because I like the idea of the delicacy of the tissue paper, but I really wasn't sure how well it was going to stand up to having modelling paste on it. So you can see I'm just using like this little silicone spatula thing to kind of scrape the modelling paste over the top of the stencil. I'm trying to make it go over the edges of the butterfly, which will help me work out where to cut when I cut it out. That'll give me the sort of outline of the butterfly so that it lays over the coloured parts neatly when it's done. So while that's drying, I'm going to set it aside and come back to my actual art journal. I've got some vintage papers here. I've got some ledger paper. I've got an old book page, and I've also got some like handwritten, like an old letter of some description. I'm pretty sure it's in German, so I don't actually know what it says, which is good because I don't want the meaning of other people's words on this page, because I want the idea of text without actually being able to read it, if that makes sense. So I'm basically just putting some layers on here so that I can build on top of them. So for that, I'm using matte medium, which is my preferred adhesive for any kind of collage because it adheres things really well and without any kind of glossy, gluey residue. So that's really good. So I'm putting this one in the middle, as you can see, and then I'm going to put the other 2 on each side. They're going to overlap the page, and I'll just trim them down. I wasn't sure how the adhesive was going to go on that handwritten page because it's obviously written with fountain pen. That kind of ink is water soluble, and when I put the glue on top, it did smudge a little bit. But I was only really putting it where I was going to cover it over with other paper anyway, so I wasn't too worried about that. But yeah, it is definitely something that to be aware of when you're using vintage papers. Sometimes the inks can behave in interesting ways depending on what kind of media you put on top of them, so it's worth being aware of that. So I've put those guys down, and now I want to get those sprays out again and use them to create some little splattery speckles for some more texture and a bit more of a kind of layered look. You can't see them super well on screen here because they're quite light coloured, but in person the speckles add a really nice layer of detail on top of those papers, and just kind of bring those colours in to the spread because it's going to be heavily sort of pink and blue. Those are really the only colours that I'm going to be using. So that's dried now, and I'm trimming the edges down. I walked away and let everything dry. And now I'm going to do some cutting out, which is one of my favourite things to do. I love fussy cutting in scrapbooking. I love collaging and all of the cutting out that goes along with that when I do art journaling. It's probably my main kind of method with art journaling. collage is probably my favourite thing to do. And yeah, so this is just a bit of that basically. I'm cutting out this one, and I really, really like the way that blue and pink blending looks towards the bottom of that butterfly's wing. I thought I would use the pink one as well, but because this page is so small, I'm actually not going to end up using that one. I made the whole thing feel a bit crowded in the end. So I'm basically going to make this blue butterfly the main focal point of the page. And now I'm going to have a play with creating those layers I was talking about. I did find that the texture paste on the tissue paper was a little bit too heavy, so it didn't behave the way that I wanted it to. Like, it just sort of felt a little bit floppy, and like the paper was kind of struggling under the weight of it, if that makes sense. But I'm still going to use them. I've cut it out. I won't make you watch me cut the whole thing out, but I did cut it out so that I could have those textured pieces there. But can you see how it's sort of flopping around? It just sort of looks a little bit not quite right. Whereas the tracing paper's got a bit more body to it, so that works quite well. It also crinkles up a little bit with when the texture paste dries, which for the butterfly wing actually looks quite cool. I think it makes it look a little bit more dimensional again and a bit more kind of natural, and I really like that. So that was a fun effect. This was a nice thing to try. So yeah, I've stapled those two layers together now, and you can lift one part of the wing and see the colour and the detail underneath it. Or you can just leave it flat and just get that suggestion of blue and pink and purple kind of coming through the top wing, which I really like. So now I have these 2 spools of blue cotton. I just got these from Daiso. They were really cheap, and they came in a pack with a few other colours as well. I think it had like 8 spools of thread or something in it, and it was only a couple of dollars, which was great. And I couldn't decide which blue to use, so I've just got both of them, and I've sort of twisted them up together. I like using thread in my art journals along with other textured things like lace and doilies and all the rest of it. And this is something that I reach for quite often in my art journals. I'm only recently starting to reach for it in my scrapbooking, but it's something I've done in art journaling for a while, just to create a lovely, soft, loose element on the page, I guess. And so these are the pieces that I did on the tissue paper. So I'm just going to stick those directly onto the page, because then they don't need that body to hold them up, because they're stuck down to the page. I wasn't sure how I wanted to do journaling on this page. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to actually write that much on here. In my art journal, sometimes I write whole pages, and other times I rely on the imagery to kind of express what I want to say on the page. But for this one, I found this sheet of clear stickers which had a few phrases on it that seemed right for me for this one. So I've stuck a couple of those down. Under the lights, they're reflecting a little bit more than I might like them to, but when you look at the page, that you don't see that shininess so much. It's just because I've got the studio lights on for filming, and it's looking a bit shinier than it otherwise might. I wanted to put a bit more of the thread on the page, so I've added some more of that matte medium, and I've put it on like a little bit thicker than I might if I was just adding paper, and then I'm adding the thread to that, and then it will sort of, as the medium sets, it will stay put. But I also wanted to put a couple of staples in there just to make sure it was extra stuck, and then cover those up with a bit more paper, and that will also help hold the thread in place as well. So you've just got that right side of the loops sort of sticking out there. So that's covered over with a bit more paper, and I'm just going to trim all the bits that are hanging over the edge of the page with my trusty scissors. And we're getting close to being done. I generally like my art journal pages to be quite minimalist. My motto with art journaling is make clean pages in messy places. My table's always a disaster, but my art journal is always very kind of light and airy and unfussy generally, with a few exceptions. But yeah, so this is pretty much almost entirely done. So I've put a little bit of journaling on that, like literally just a phrase on that sticker that label sticker. And now I'm grabbing some gesso and I'm watering it down with a bit of water, as you do. And I'm just going to put some white splatters, because once I put that label on, I realised the whiteness in that label was much starker than the vintage papers, and it just stood out a little bit too much. So I thought if I introduce a bit more of that bright white in the form of some gesso splatters, that will help kind of make the whole thing come together a little bit more. So that's the logic there. So I'm adding those in. I'm trying to create some different sized drips. Some of them are quite big and others are tiny little speckles. And that is, just to bring the page together. And that is it. That's the layout. I really hope you like it. I would like to include some more art journal pages on here, so let me know if it's something that you're interested in seeing. Make sure you like and subscribe if you're so inclined, and head over to Patreon if you would like to find some extra goodies, extra videos and things, and make sure you check out Kitaholic Kits, because you can get all of these goodies in that kit. All right, bye.